Hello developers, how are you doing today? Hope you're doing great learning and sharing things. Welcome to your channel JavaScript where you learn things fundamentally. JavaScript is a vast language. It has multiple things to learn about and practice. Every framework or library that is built on JavaScript needs the fundamental things to be very clear before you start attempting them. Be it React, Next.js, Angular, Vue, anything that you pick up. Today, we are going to talk about one such fundamental aspects, and again it's a crash course. Thank you very much for liking the JavaScript function crash course. I got a lot of love. You guys really made me feel happy. Thank you very much for that. So in today's crash course, we are also going to do the similar thing. I am going to teach you things in and out with multiple examples so that you will never ever forget. Again, the disclaimer, once you go through this course, going through the topic is okay, but it is not enough. You have to practice. So once you go through it perfectly fine. But after that, make your own examples, do your own practice. That's the way you will learn better. That's the way you will learn faster. Otherwise, no course in the world can teach you how to do programming. You have to practice. But before that, as usual, one request, if you have not subscribed for this channel, go ahead and subscribe. I'm sure you won't be disappointed. Let's get started. JavaScript modules, what are those? Before we get an answer for that, let us go a few decades back. Probably the time when JavaScript was just born and people started using JavaScript, started making their web pages dynamic. What they used to do, they used to have all their application logic, business logic into one gigantic JavaScript file. Then they used to take that import the JavaScript into their HTML file with the script tag, and they will be sprinkle some amount of CSS styling on top of that, and that's how the web page will be built. Okay, things used to be very simple because the number of use cases people had to solve at that point of time through web was very limited. It's not like today. Today we have bunch of use cases, we have bunch of things, we have lot of libraries, we have lot of frameworks that are coming on top of it, bringing things on top of that. We are coding. So think about it, the amount of JavaScript we are writing for one application is also growing huge. Now, if we want to go in the same fashion that we used to go a few decades back, like putting all our JavaScript into one file and expect that to work, that it may work, but it is going to create a lot of chaos. What kind of chaos? You have written all your functionality to one JavaScript file. That's fair enough, but a tiny part of it, your friend, is needed now as an implementation into the other side of the app, right? How are you going to share that? Are they going to copy paste the portion of the code that they require, or is there any other way? So there was definitely a need, the need of creating something which is smaller so that it is not putting so much load, it is not so heavy on the file size, which is reusable. It means that somebody is creating it, other person can use it very easily. And it is something that is self-explanatory. It means that if it has one job to do, it is very well defined what kind of job that particular piece is supposed to do. So think about something like this. You have gigantic.js file. Okay, so sorry for this name. This is something that came in my mind. Gigantic.js file. Like, imagine it's a file which is having bunch of JavaScript code, bunch of business logic into it. You will never like, working with a file like this in your HTML file. It's very heavy and none of this is kind of reusable, right? So it doesn't solve anything for you. Rather than that, what you would like to do, you probably want to split that gigantic JavaScript file into smaller JavaScript files, which are supposed to do something very logical. And the best part over here is that things are reusable. For example, module 5 needs something from module 1, or module 1 needs something from module 2, module 3 needs something from module 2, things like that. Like the key sharing can keep happening. Modules were introduced in JavaScript since ES6 with the purpose that you will keep your code short in a JavaScript file, and also the reusability factor of your code goes very high. Things become more cleaner, and so that you as a developer really don't be frustrated as and when your project grows. You have more features to add. You don't keep adding into one file. Rather, you keep creating module, keep them separated, keep them reusable, and make your life happy. So that's what is model about. Next, what we are going to learn about something called import and export. Whenever we talk about JavaScript modules, import and export, these two terms will automatically come in because they play a very vital role in terms of sharing things from one module to another module and making things working for the entire application. All right, so let's get into understanding how import and export works. Let's learn about import and export. But before that, what does import and export mean? I always believe that once you want to learn something programmatically or a programming jargon, programming term, you always need to learn that thing maybe with real life. And then it's become very easy once you understand the meaning of it. So let's understand what is import and export in plain English. So import and export, when it comes, it mostly comes for different kind of services. For example, I am providing a service and I want to export that service to somebody, maybe in a foreign country. And in the foreign country, there is somebody sitting who wants to import that service in their country and then they use it. As simple as that. So I export, somebody else import. So for example, we have Tina here. So Tina is a blogger and she actually export her articles to Larry. And Larry is someone who takes, basically import her article and pay her some money, right? So that's how the import export in general works in the real life. Now, when it comes to programming, the fundamental is kind of similar. Is like something you have to export so that somebody or something else can import and make use of it, right? Now we are going to get into the coding so that we understand how the export import works in module, what exactly the module in coding, everything will unfold. Then we'll go to our next chapter, right? So let's get into the coding. So let us understand import and export with code. The code base looks kind of pretty simple. I have an index.html file and then a main.js file, and I have imported the main.js file into index.html file. You can see it using the script tag. So everything seems to be good. Just want to make sure that things works. So I'll just go ahead and do a console.log and say that learning modules, right? So if I do that and then control S, save it, I get learning module. So everything works. Now, the thing about module is like we have to export something from a module. Module is nothing but a JavaScript file. And then we will be able to import it to another JavaScript file. So I have to first write a code which will export something from a JavaScript file, which is a module. And that something I'll be able to import back into another JavaScript file. So for that, let me create a file. Let's say the file name is calc.js. Probably I'll be doing some calculation. And let me start doing some simple calculation, not so heavy one. Maybe things like const sum equals to a colon b. So it is basically doing a summation as you would have guessed, and then return a plus b, right? So a simple sum function. Similarly, I can have one more function, maybe that is called subtraction or sub. So let's have one more function called sub, and we have a and b as a parameter and do a minus b. Very simple. Now, if I have to export these two functions so that I can invoke these two functions from another JavaScript file, I have to export these functions. Now, I'm only talking about functions. Does it mean that I can export only functions? No. Mostly, actually, in your programming, you will be exporting only function, but there will be time when you will be exporting some object, a JavaScript object, maybe an array, could be a class, or maybe a variable if there is a need. So anything in JavaScript like variable, class, function, object, array, you can export. In our crash course, we'll be mostly taking the example of function, but you will be able to export everything. So please try exporting a variable, try exporting an object when you practice after learning and going through this crash course. Okay, so how can we export? The way you can export is like by using this keyword called export. This is one way of exporting. So you do export and then you do export over here, and you have now exported these two functions from calc.js file. Fair enough. Now what we are going to do, as we have exported, the next thing that we are going to do is importing these importing these functions from this file to another JavaScript module, to another JavaScript file in that case, and then use it, right? We are not using this over here. We just defined it here. So we have another JavaScript file called main.js, and this main.js, what we are going to do, we are going to first import them. So if I try to import, the syntax would be like first do a import keyword, and then there is a curly braces, and then you give what you want to import from which file. So for us, from of course is the .calc.js file. So here one thing that I want to call out, if you are doing a module import or anything importing from a module in plain JavaScript environment, you have to give this extension .js. If you don't give this extension, just put it like ./calc, which works on React and any other framework kind of thing. But for plain JavaScript, you will get error. Okay, so you have to give calc.js. And then over here, start typing what you want to import. So we are exporting two things from here. One is sum, another is sub. So we may want to import both of them, like sum, and then we are going to import sub. Or if you want to import just one thing, you can import one thing. Now after importing that, I just press Ctrl S and I'm getting an error. Do you see that error? The error says cannot use import statement outside of a module. Okay, I have intentionally created this error. Why? Why exactly? Because if you are using, importing something from a module, wherever you are importing things, from a module, that particular JavaScript file also needs to be a module. How it can be a module? So if I am going to index.html file and I have imported main.js over here, but I am not saying that main.js is a different than any other normal JavaScript file. I'm not saying it's a module. So how am I going to tell it's a module? Because of that, it is giving this error. So I have to say type equals to module. So if I do this, you see the error has gone. So it means now main.js can import from other modules because it itself is a module. So I'll go to main.js again, and this is done. I have imported. The next thing that I can do is console.log of sum. Let's put two numbers, 2, 3. So I'll get a 5. You get a 5 over here, right? Similarly, if I want to test sub over here and give some number like say 10, 5, of course it will return again 5, right? So I know now I have actually defined something in a different module, a calculation module. I have exported these two things from here. I have come to another module where I have used this, right? So this is one way that you can export. What is the other way that you can export? Other way that you can export is, instead, if you want to export multiple things from one module, instead of putting the export keyword in front of everything that you want to export, you can do them together as well. So for example, you can do something like this: export, then you can do sum, sub. This also works. You are still getting the same 5 and 5 output, right? So either you do export keyword with each of the thing that you want to export, or you start your definition, finish your definition, at the end of the file, at the end of the module, you export them. Now you might feel like, I have exported multiple things from a file and I'm importing them into another file. I'm kind of making use of them. But is there more to it? Yes, there are more to it. There is something that you need to know, which is called as default import and default export. So I will be also getting into that in a moment. So there is one more way that you can export. Okay. The one that we just now learned is called named export. Okay. Named export. The other way that you can export is called default export. But before you go there, let me explain why it is called named export. It is because with the name that you are actually exporting, you have to import with the same name. For example, I have exported them with sub, and I am trying to import them with sum1 and making it sum1 and try to do this. You can see what is happening. The error says that it is not available. sum1 is not available in calc.js file basically. So in the named export and named import, it is mandatory that the name that you are using to export your data from one module, you have to use the same name to import it back into another module. You cannot really, use another name while importing. There is something called alias, by the way, which I'm going to teach you in the subsequent chapter in this course. But alias is a bit different, but the fundamental thing over here is like when you export and import using the named export and import, you have to use the same name while exporting and importing. You got my point. So I'll just revert back, things work again. Now there is another one which is called default export and default import. What exactly default export and import? Let us see. So here what I'm going to do, I'm going to create another file. the name of the file I'm going to give it like maybe whoami.js. Okay, nothing fancy about whoami.js. It's just going to do like const say my name equals to, and it is going to return say happy. Yeah, happy. All right. So it is returning a name, say JavaScript, my channel name. And what we're going to do now, we can do export, but we'll be using a keyword along with this called default, and then we'll specify what we want to export. In this case, this particular function. Either you can do in this way, or an alternate way of doing this would be you comment this out and just do export default this way. So either you do it while you are defining it, or you will do it towards the end. In general, I like defining things at the top and then exporting things at the bottom. I feel that is more clear, but it is up to your personal preference how do you want to go about it. But what about this default export all about? So the default export means when you want to export only one thing from a module, use default export. So it means that this is your default export of this module. You understand it this way. It's a default export from this module. But when we did named export, for example, we cannot say sum is a default export because there are multiple things you are exporting from a module. So when you're exporting multiple things from a module, you always use a named export, and with the same name you import. But when you have only one thing to export from a file, you will or a module, you will be using something called a default export. All right. Now, where default export may be useful, if you know React or any component based programming library or framework, you know that the components at the end of the day are nothing but the plain old JavaScript functions. So you usually will write one component in a file as a module. So it means that you can actually export one function from a file. So in that case, you export only one component from a file. In that case, it makes sense to make it as default export because you are exporting just one thing. So that's why it exists. But if you are making something like an utility, something as a util file, something like a library where you have multiple functionalities within one module, then you want to go for a named export with the curly braces. You don't want to do the default export. So you know what is the differentiation between a default and the named export import right now. But I'm yet to show you one thing. I have exported the default one, but I have not imported it. How do I import it? Let's see that as well. So we'll go back to our main.js file. And in the main.js file, we are going to now learn about our default export and default import. All right. So let me import. So import, how do you do this? There are two ways. One way you can do like import default as. Now here is a catch. Once you do a default export and try to import it, it is not mandatory that you use the same name that you used while exporting to import the same thing. You don't have to, because you are exporting just one thing and you are importing into another module just that one thing. So from that particular module, it is guaranteed that there is only one thing coming. So there is no name confusion. There is nothing as such possibility is there. So it means that while importing, you can give any name. But in our case, the function name was say my name. We'll go ahead with say my name first. So let's go ahead say my name, and then we'll do from who am I. Of course, you have to do .js, otherwise you'll get an error. So I have now imported it. So next thing what I can do, console.log of say name, which is supposed to return JavaScript. What it does, like, is return JavaScript. So this is great. This works. Now, if I do, instead of say my name, I'll just give my channel name, right? So instead of using the same name, I'm using my channel name now. I'll still get the same output without any error because it's a default import and default export. I hope it is clear to you. Now, there is another syntax that you can use because this is a little bit verbose, like default as, and you're also using this curly braces. So instead of that, you can simply use something like this. Instead of default as, just ignore everything. This also works. So it means that if you don't want to go with this curly braces, You don't have to actually use default as. There are a lot of less coding. So you can directly use the function name or the component name if it is React.js or things like that. Then you can actually use it. And even in this case also, you may choose to go with the exactly same name that you are exporting to import, or you can give your own name or other name because it's a default import and export. And JavaScript knows that from this particular file or this particular module, you are just exporting one thing. So there is no basically confusion of any kind of name problems or name collisions or things like that. So hope the default thing is also clear. Default import export is very clear to you. Next, we are going to learn about aliases. Let's learn about aliases. We will learn about aliases now. So while importing, exporting mechanism, you can use something called an alias or the alias name. The alias is used while importing certain things that you have exported from another modules. And why we need aliases? So for example, you are exporting sum and sub from here. There is two functions that we are exporting. And then when you go to main.js, we are importing those two over here, right? Now, it might happen that in your application, you are using another library which are exporting something with the same name, right? There are two libraries exporting things from the same name, and they are exporting with a named export. So it means that you have to import with the same name. You don't have a way like a default export import where you can actually use any name while importing. So what do you do in that case? You need something to save you. So for that, the alias come into picture. What is alias? Alias is while importing something from another module, if you want to give another name of your choice because you think that there could be a name conflict, you can choose to do that by using an alias. So I'm saying that the sum as I'm going to do something like add, right? I can say sum and addition is kind of same thing. So now onwards, if I am trying to do Control S, I'll be getting an error because you cannot use sum over here because sum is no more known, which was coming from calc.js file. It is no more known because you have to use this alias name. That's the way you can resolve the conflicts. That's the way you resolve the same name conflict, the same thing that's been exported from different module, different libraries. Now you're importing all of them into one module, into one place, and you have a name conflict. That's the time you can use aliases using the as keyword. So you can do as many aliases possible while importing. You can even do sub as minus and use the minus over here instead of sub. So I hope the aliases were useful and you learned something about it. Next, we are going to talk about namespaces. There is something called namespaces in import and export. Let's learn about that. At times, you may need to import a large number of functions from a module. It can happen, right? So in our case, the calc file is having only two functions. I think it's like sum and sub. Yeah. But in real life programming, you might have much more logically related functions, objects, things like that into one module. You may have that, right? It would be tedious or too much of code to import them as comma separated, as we have seen so far. So what we have seen is like when we are importing them, we are doing like comma separated. Think about it like you have 7 such thing that you are exporting from calc.js file. So you have to write them like with comma separated one by one, which is like very, very tedious, right? So we have a shorthand for that, and that is what is called a namespace. So now I'm going to show you like how to use namespace, and the namespace is pretty handy when you have multiple things to export and those things you want to import into another module. All right, so we have this calc already. That's fine, perfectly fine. Now what we are going to do, we are going to import calc in import the sum and sub in a bit different way. So what we're going to do, I'm just commenting them out so that I can write it clearly. So I'll be doing like import star. Star means everything, right? And then give it as alias, give it as an alias or name, because star means everything, but we want to give something as a name, and this is what is called namespace. As let's give it as something called calc, right? And then we'll be doing from /calc.js. Fair enough? So we have done it. We have imported everything, given that everything are namespace calc. It means that using this calc, I will be now able to access everything that I'm importing from calc. So calc is having two methods, we know, sum and sub. So I will be able to now access sum using calc. I'll be able to access sub using calc. How will be accessing it? I'll be doing calc dot sum. I'll be doing calc dot sub. Great. So it's still giving 5 and 5 as my output. 2 plus 3 5, 10 minus 5 is 5. So namespace, again, a very handy feature when you do export and import. And why you do when you export a lot of stuff from a module and want to import them, it is very tedious for you to kind of type things down. Instead of that, you will be importing star as a namespace, and using that namespace name, now you will be able to invoke everything that you are exporting from another module. Great, fair enough. Let's move on to the next one, where we are going to see something called combine import and export. Okay, so let's see that. Let's learn the concept of combine export. What exactly combine export? As the name suggests, the combine export means you will be combining thing and exporting them. But why will you do that? Okay, so let's take up a case. For example, we have calc.js file. From here, we are doing some kind of named export so that we can actually do a named import into another module. Okay, fair enough. Then we have who am I, from where we are doing a default export, and we can do a default import of who am I from another modules. Fair enough. But let's think that we have a use case, like there is one file or one module where we need methods from calc. Also, we need method from who am I. Now, what we have to do is like we have to do something like what we are doing in main.js. We'll be first importing calc, then we'll be importing say things like the name from the who am I, and then we'll be start using them over here. Now there are only two modules. Is simple. How about there are like 10 modules or 15 modules? So what we'll be doing over here is like we'll be importing 10 or 15 things on each of the files that require methods or that require the exports from each of this module. Okay, I'm repeating again. So if you need some functions, or if you need all the functions or all the things or all the exports from each of these modules, you need to import them over here. And if you need them into multiple such modules, you have to import them multiple such places. Now here there are only two, it is fine. But if the number is 10 or 15, you have to do this 10 or 15 imports every time on every module wherever you want to use the exported items. Instead of that, what we can do is like we can create a module which is intermediate, which is in between. It's called a combine module. And that combine module is where we can export all of this thing so that we can import from only one module instead of importing from all, each of them. Okay, confusing? Let's see by example. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to create something called a combine.js. Make sense? So in the combine.js, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do export. I'm not doing import, I'm doing export. Star as calc from /calc.js. Do you know what it is? If you don't know, I just taught you, just go back. I just taught you about namespace. So what I'm doing is like, I am exporting everything from calc.js file, but I'm exporting as a namespace because there are multiple things calc.js exports. I don't want to type them one by one. I know the advantage of calc. I know the advantage of a namespace. So I'm using that. And then next thing I'm going to do, export default, right? Default as, let's give a name, channel name from /who am I, all right, .js. All right. So now from the combine.js file, I have now exported everything that I have to export, so that any module now want to import anything from this, they don't have to again import them individually. Rather, they just need to import this combine.js, and from there they will be able to extract things. How? Let's see that. So coming to the main.js file, I'm going to remove everything. I'm going to remove all these things. And instead of that, what I'll be doing now, I'm importing from the combine.js file. So for that, again, I'll be using namespace, a very powerful feature, star as combine from /combine.js file. Okay. So one thing I want to highlight, not many places you will find, that you will be learning the usage of things like this, like how to really do your better module architecture. So I'm teaching you out of experience. I'm teaching you like whatever I have learned. So I want you to pay solid attention here, like why we are doing this and what is the right way of doing things, right? So please spend some time and of course do some practice, okay, as and when you are learning. So import star as combine. Now we have a new namespace called combine. So using this combine namespace, now I will be able to import everything that is there in the combine.js file, right? So what is there in the combine.js file? The combine.js file is having everything from the calc.js, everything from the whoami. From whoami, things are straightforward, just one default export. So one thing that I can actually import. But from calc.js, again I'm using a namespace because I didn't want to type all the exported item over here. Instead of I'm using a namespace. So to access the thing that is there in the calc.js, I have to now go through this namespace. So I have to chain the namespaces. So here what I'll be doing now, I'll be doing console.log so that I can print it. Combine my namespace dot I want to take from calc. So calc will be my namespace. And then I will have an access to my sum and sub. So I cannot do sum and sub directly. It is printing the result also because now it is exposed. The sum and sub are exposed through this particular namespace into the combine.js file. So I can only access them through the namespace only. But there is no namespace funda over here at all, right? I have just used a different name because it's a default export import. I can use any name. So this is directly accessible from the combine.js namespace, which is combine.js namespace is combine. So I'll just copy this thing so that I don't have to type it again. And instead of calc.sum, I can directly do channel name. See here, you got the output. So this combine export is very useful feature when you have multiple modules which are exporting things and you have to import them into multiple places. That time combine into one intermediate module and from there you export it so that in the multiple places like in the main.js or anywhere else, you just have to import it once and you have to use it. Also along with that, please make use of the namespace fundamentals that you have learned now so that it is kind of you very less typing. You are not importing everything. Think about if calc.js having 15 methods. You are not typing all 15 methods over here. Rather, you have created a namespace. And when you are importing it, whatever you need, you just importing that part using the namespace chain. So hope it is clear. Combine export. Please make use of it. Please practice this again and again so that you know it completely. So friends, are you enjoying so far? Are you enjoying what I'm teaching and whatever you're learning? Make sure you practice enough. Make sure that you write code of everything that you're learning here. So now a very interesting chapter that we're going to get started is about dynamic imports. Dynamic imports is immensely useful, and in any library or framework that you'll be working in future, maybe React, Vue or anywhere, you will be using dynamic import a lot to take care of the application performance, loading things at the runtime and things like that. So we'll be explaining, we'll be learning everything about dynamic import. But before that, if you are liking what I'm teaching, please go ahead and subscribe if you have not subscribed. Also, you can join me as a member, join JavaScript as a member so that you can get some member only perks. So go check out the membership as well. All right. So coming back to dynamic imports. To explain dynamic imports, I have created a very simple module called greeting. You have seen it enough so far with the previous chapters. You have say hi and you have say hola. There's two greeting message which logs just hi and hola. And after that, I'm exporting them from here with the name export. So I can go to main.js file and I can actually import them, say hi and say hola like this. And after that, what I can do, I can just use say hi and then I can use say hola. And I'm expecting that this will run well and it is going to print me hi and hola. Fair enough. Everything works perfectly. And this import and this export, that what we have done just now, is called static import and export. Okay. Static import, static export. No rocket science. Now what we're going to talk about dynamic import and export. But why? What is the reason? The reason over here that the static import and export cannot be conditional. So for example, you cannot do something like if my mood is okay, then import say hi and say hola. Else don't import anything. You cannot do this with static import. Even if you want to, there will be a syntax error, there will be error. So you cannot do like conditional things with static import and export. Okay. The other thing that the problem is like all this import happens at the top of the file. So whether you are using them at a later point of time or not at the runtime doesn't matter, but the import is done basically. So if you have to take some decision at the runtime that what you want to import and what you want to use with static import, that is not there. That burden is always there. In your programming, you might want something which you don't want to import things, in advance. Rather, you want to import it at the runtime only when if it is required. So on those cases, you have to make use of something called dynamic import. And this is what I am going to teach you now. So please pay attention of how to do dynamic import. So first thing to do to teach you the syntax. So how to do dynamic import? Dynamic import, to do that, you have to use a function like syntax called import. And then you have to pass what you want to import. So we want to import here greetings.js. Okay. So this is what the dynamic import is. Now, once you do this import, passing the module that you want to import, this import returns you a promise. Now, if you are new to JavaScript asynchronous programming and promises, I have created an extensive series on JavaScript asynchronous programming and promises. Please go ahead and check that later point of time. But understand that it resolves something as promises, which you can resolve it to get the value of this, what this module is actually giving you. Okay. Now, there are multiple ways you can do resolving of a promise. One way, of course, you can use the handler methods called then, catch, finally, all this thing, or you can do like async and await keyword. Okay, so syntactically async and await may be much straightforward. That's why I'll be using async and await over here. But if you want to get a deeper picture of promises, his handler methods, async and await, again, I told you I have a full series of this one, asynchronous programming. Go ahead and check that. Okay. So now, as it returns a promise, I have to resolve this. I'll be using the await keyword. Okay. So if I use the await keyword, so I can actually now get the resolved value of what this import is going to return to me. The resolved value that import is going to return to me is nothing but whatever I have exported from this module, which is say hi, comma, say hello, hola, I guess. So say hola, and then I can actually give a const in front of it. So it means I have now dynamically imported, you see the output is also coming, dynamically imported say hi, say hola, and I'm using it. Now, what is the advantage of doing this? One of the advantages, you can use this particular syntax anywhere, any place in the code, not necessarily you have to always use at the top level, at the beginning of your module, as we have seen with the static import. You can actually write any number of code on top of it, any number of code on top of it, like, const abc equals to something, or then some logic, everything you can done. And after that, you can do dynamic import. This is one thing. So you have a flexibility of dynamic import of doing it at the runtime. Second flexibility that you have is like this entire thing. Actually, I can just do if true, just for example, so that the true false things works, and I can entire thing I can keep inside a block. Okay, let's try if this works. This works, right? I have kept everything inside a block. You cannot do this with the static import. Now think about it. You can write a code like, if my mood is okay is a boolean, and if it is true, I am in a mood to give you greetings, say hi and say hola, else I don't want to see your face. Okay, so things like that, right? So you can do any kind of logic, and inside the logic you can do dynamic import, which is like awesome thing in my opinion. Okay, so one more thing I want to kind of touch base a little bit, I would say advanced level, little bit deeper level, but doesn't matter. You guys know everything now, so you can actually follow it. As you now know, like the import, while dynamic import returns a promise, right? That's why we are using await over here. So it means that I can now load multiple modules dynamically, concurrently, simultaneously. How? Using something called promise.all method. What does promise.all method or the promise.all settled method, methods like that do? What promise.all method do is like if I do promise.all, this particular method, what it does basically, it takes an array of all the promises and then run them in parallel. After they resolve, it actually send all the resolve promises to you, and then you can actually extract the values from them. So think about a case like where you have this particular await, like await import greeting.js, right? So you have this particular call over here, a particular module that you are importing, and in parallel you want to import another module. Let's take that as an example. Also, I'll be doing await. Let's take another module. We have this calc module, right? If you have not forgotten calc, so we have something called /calc.js. So what I have done right now, I have done promise.all, and in that what I am doing, I am having an array. Inside that array promise.all, in that array I am passing all the modules that I want to import all at once. Okay, you will be doing things like this in programming. When you're doing real programming, not like just side hustle, or maybe even in the side hustles, not just like for fun, but if you're doing something really solid, serious stuff, you will be doing things like this. You will be actually trying to dynamic import multiple modules. So this is one of the way. Now what it returns, it will return bunch of promises. Okay, so I'll catch them inside branch of promises. So how I'm teaching you, just go step by step, okay, so that you learn it completely. What it returns promises, and if I just expand it, the promise status says fulfilled. I'll just expand it a little bit. It says fulfilled, means all the promises resolved successfully. The result is 2 arrays. Why 2 arrays? Because we are now importing 2 modules. If we had imported 3 modules, we would have got 3 arrays. Okay. So in each of this array, we have the output of it. This is the fantastic part of it. So all the output has come together in this, so that I can now extract all the output together, right? So what will happen now if I expand this one? I see say hi and say hola, because I'm importing from greetings, right? I'm importing from greetings over here. Now if I just expand the second one, do you see what you have? You have sum and sub, because I'm doing from calc. So this is what is very, very powerful. Now how do you do this? This is a promise. Now to extract really the value out of it, what we'll be doing? We'll be doing like promises dot. If you have to resolve it, you'll be doing then, and then you get the result. I'll write an arrow function, and here now let me do console.log of result, just to make you understand like what is going on, right? We'll go step by step. Again, we don't have any hurry. I'll do so now what we have array of 2 modules. So it means that from the promises we got the promise. Now we are resolving the promise. The result after resolving the promise is an array which gives me all the information from each of this module import. So the first one, I got the first module. Again, first module, if I expand, I have say hi, say hola. Second module, if I I will have sum and sub, right? Now, how will I extract the results from this? What do you think? How am I going to do this? So I can do simply result of 0, which is the first module. On that, I can do say hi, right? And if I put inside the console.log, this guy dot log say hi over here, yeah, I am going to get hi. So instead of that, if I do hola, I have it. Now if I want to go, the sum and sub, that is there in the another array. So I can go result of 1, and I can do sum of 2, 3. I'm going to get the 5. So the thing that I wanted to explain over here, very, very important. Okay, a quick recap. When you want to do dynamic imports of multiple modules, you can do dynamic imports of multiple modules using the static methods that JavaScript Promise APIs provides. Again, if you are new to it, I have an extensive video and also developed a tool for you to learn it. Go ahead and check that video where I have mentioned the tool. You can learn from the tool like how each of this method works, like promise.all, promise.res, promise.all settled, all you can learn. But for now, promise.all is a method from the JavaScript Promise API's inbuilt method, which can take multiple promises together, execute them, and then return the array of promises that you can use to extract out whether there is a success or there is a failure. If there is a success, you will get a value. So in our case, each of this dynamic import, nothing but it returns a promise. So we just put them inside this promise.all, and after that it returns all the promises. Then we resolve these promises, we get the result, which is nothing but again an array of each of this module with the resolved result. It means that whatever they are exporting, we can actually now import it back. So this is one way when things gets complex you can actually use. I thought of just touching base because I have used it in my programming. I'm sure that somewhere down the line you will be using it too. I hope you like it. I hope you like dynamic imports. I hope you enjoyed learning dynamic imports. So friends, we are back again after all the chapters, after all the coding. I hope you liked all the chapters, and please do practice. There is one more item that I want to mention before I end this video. There's a term called tree shaking, right? So the tree shaking is a term that I think that was introduced by Rollup, if I'm not wrong, but it's very widely known term. What exactly it means? It means is like, now when you are exporting a lot of stuff from a module, and then you are importing all those stuff into another module, but you are importing, but you may not end up using everything, right? You have done like star as like with an namespace, you imported everything, but you are not using everything, right? Then what is happening is like it is an unnecessary load, it is an unnecessary thing that you are bundling when you are bundling for your production build. That is where some of the bundler like Webpack, Rollup, and all these things, that they come up with the feature of tree shaking. What they can do for the development build, there is no change. Basically everything gets combined. But for a production build, you can enable things in such a way that only whatever gets imported into your module, only that much gets bundled into the production build. So you don't unnecessarily bundle things which you are not importing, right? Which you are not doing it. So the thumb rule over here, be very cautious about what you are trying to import in your module. Don't import things that you won't be using it. As simple as that. So that the final production build size, the bundle size, will be smaller. If you try to import everything but you don't use it, this is unnecessary lying there like a stale code, dead code. So this phenomena of removing the stale code, removing that code that you are not going to use, is called tree shaking. So if you want to learn more about tree shaking, please go ahead and read from the web. There are a lot of articles, a lot of videos out there. So with that, this particular crash course come to an end. I'll just do a quick recap. Whatever we have learned what JavaScript modules are. We have learned how to do import and export. We have learned what is named export, what is default export. Then we have learned how to combine things together. We have learned what is namespace. We have learned what is dynamic import. We have learned how to do multiple dynamic imports, how to handle using promises. And we finally spoke about tree shaking. So we have learned a lot. Now what do you have to do? If you have come so far learning everything with me, just go ahead and practice. Whatever examples I have done, whatever you have learned so far, just put your own examples. Do practice. If you have any doubt, put a comment into the comment section. I'll respond back to you. And if you like this video, my request will be you press the like button and then you share this video among your circle so that others also get benefit out of it. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, go ahead and subscribe, because much more interesting things are about to come. Alright, take a great care of yourself. I'll be back very soon with another video. Thank you very much.